Morning, everybody, and welcome to the Environment Select meeting. I'm Councillor Jerry Cunkliffe, the chairman, and I will do the introductions as we go through. First of all, Simon, can we have the apologies, please?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Jones, Councillor Jacob, Councillor Murray and Councillor McGrath.
Right, so there's no other apologies we know of. So we'll move on to item 2, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. That was on the 20th of September. So is there, I would like to say that they are perhaps a true record. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Rich Rogers. I'll take that one and thank you. Any objections to that from anyone? No? Right, then that, all in favour of that? Yep, okay, that's successfully moved. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of disclosable interests or dispensations as granted by the Standards Committee? We have one. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. So item 8, the update on the homeless strategy. Just in the spirit of openness, I'd like to make a declaration of non-pecuniary interest in that I'm a trustee of a homeless charity in Devizes.
Okay, Kieran, I take that. That's absolutely fine. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any others? No? Right. So we'll now go with the chairman's announcements. I'll bring the select committee up to date with meetings that I have attended in my capacity as chairman of the Environment Select Committee. Since the last select committee meeting on the 20th of September, I have attended Overview Scrutiny Management Committee on the 28th of September, Cabinet on the 11th of October, and I've received briefings on the following. 1, remobilisation of the City Hall at Salisbury, 4th of October. New term highways maintenance contract on the 7th of October. Parish stewards on the 7th of October. There are also 2 further items I'd like to draw to the attention of the Select Committee members. Training. The Council has commissioned training from the Centre of Governance and Scrutiny, CFGS, to support members to undertake effective scrutiny of the authority's financial arrangements and performance. This will take place at 2 p.m. on Thursday, the 24th of November, and is particularly aimed at members of all select committees and financial planning task group. Note that this is training will be face-to-face at County Hall, Trowbridge, and spaces are therefore limited. Please contact Simon by email to book your place. And then also there is a visit planned, or the opportunity for members of the Select Committee to the materials recycling facility at Cowan, as requested by us, the committee here. There are a limited number of places available to visit, and it's at 9:30 a.m. on Friday, the 18th of November. So while we're having this meeting, if you look in your diaries, if you are able to attend, then please give your name to Simon at the end of the meeting. 5. Public participation. Is there any public participation today? Nope. Okay. And now, so we now move on to the main part of the agenda. And can I gently remind committee members during our forthcoming discussions to keep any statements to a minimum? I also ask members not to ask any parochial questions unless it to illustrate a broader point about policy, services or delivery. So we'll now go on to item 6, which is update on the Wiltshire Housing Development Partnership. And with us today, it's item 6 on the agenda. It's on the Wiltshire Housing Development Partnership, pages 11 to 24. This report provides an update to the Select Committee on the Council's partnership with registered housing providers. Introducing this, we have Councillor Phil Alford, Cabinet Member for Housing, Strategic Assets, Asset Transfer. Now, unfortunately, Parvis Kansari cannot be with us today from Corporate Place because of the peer review. We are joined by Victoria Maloney, Head of Economic and Generation, Richard Walter, Head of Service, Major Projects, Claire Moore, Housing Enabling Lead. So if the Cabinet Member of the Office would like to give a brief introduction, and then I'll perhaps open it to the floor afterwards. Okay, so the floor is yours at the back. Welcome.
Thanks, Jerry. And good morning, everyone. members of the committee. Thanks for inviting us along today. So as you know, we have some challenges in Wiltshire in terms of the delivery of affordable housing and making sure we've got sufficient supply. Now, helping us to manage the relationship we have with our registered providers is our team, who are going to give you an update on the Housing Development Partnership. And they're going to give you a bit more detail on how that's progressing and how that's enabling us to meet, obviously, those things that we've identified within the business plan and to help deliver these affordable homes. So on that, then, I'm going to pass over to Richard here.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I'm Richard Walters. I'm the Head of Service for Major Projects and Housing Enabling and lead the Housing Enabling team. The paper that we provided, Chair, sets out the work of the enabling team with regard to the Housing Development Partnership, which is a partnership that has been established for around 9 years and renewed, and I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail. It's important to highlight that there is a housing target of 650 affordable homes per year, and that's derived from the Wiltshire Core Strategy, which identifies a target of 13,000 affordable homes over the planned period. The role of the Housing Enabling team is to engage with the planning process, liaise with developers and registered providers to ensure that the housing delivered meets the demonstrable needs in terms of tenure, unit size, and the provision of adapted units. So with regard to the registered providers, affordable housing plays a vital role, clearly in terms of its for our communities, and the RPs essentially provide a role in terms of purchasing affordable housing units to be delivered by developers, which have been secured through Section 106 planning obligations, and developing affordable housing units on small 100% affordable housing sites. There has been a partnership in place with RPs since 2009, and in 2021, following the agreement of the Cabinet, the Council renewed the Housing Development Partnership and adopted a more formal approach to the selection of our partners. So that was a process that was undertaken involving the Cabinet member, and the RPs were required to demonstrate a willingness to assist in working towards the aims of the partnership, and those that could demonstrate that were invited to join. The objectives of the partnership are set out in the paper, and I won't rehearse them in detail here, but the selection process that we undertook resulted in a total of 11 provider partners joining the partnership, including both larger national RPs and some smaller local providers. And of the 11, one of the partners is the council's own residential development team. The partnership is funded by a partnership fee, which is reduced for those partners with stock of less than 1,000 units. So in terms of the effectiveness of the partnership, it does continue to facilitate the delivery of affordable housing. Partnership meetings are held quarterly and are very well attended by the senior RP partners managements involved in the delivery of new developments. We have adopted a new format for meetings to focus on the council's key priorities, and we've held meetings with themes including climate change, where we've invited Ariane Crampton and the climate change team to outline their experience, and invited RPs to share their own in terms of best practice. And the last meeting we had a focus around planning, and we've certainly had very positive feedback from the RP partners in those from the new format of the meetings, that they get a lot out of it, and it's very, very good in terms of our relationship with the partners going forward. I don't have a great deal more to say in respect of the paper that we've submitted, but I've got Claire Moore here, who's our Housing Enabling lead, and myself, and be very happy to answer questions from the committee.
So Claire, is there anything you want to add to that, or are you happy as we go from there? Just testing. Right, and so I'm going to open this up to questions then from the floor. See if there's any hands going to go up here at the moment in time. Councillor Matthew Brown.
Thank you, Chair. You've said don't become too parochial, but it's difficult in some ways not to. But I presume Green Square obviously is one of these providers, and we've certainly had a bit of a problem with a certain housing block in my area where it was originally kind of designed for 55s and over. It's mostly inhabited by people a lot older than that. But some much younger people were put in, and then it resulted in a drugs problem, and the police were involved, and all the rest of it. And I just wondered to what extent, in terms of the partnership, Wiltshire Council can, if there are problems like that, can intervene to make sure that people are put in the right places, because it can result in a lot of confusion and worry on the part of you know, the main bulk of the residents when that sort of thing happens. Thank you.
Want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'll respond to that one. Yeah, I mean, to make it clear, this is a development partnership. So we're looking at new stock and what we can do to influence new stock coming forward. If there's any issue with current stock, we can put that across to our partners, but we're dealing with the development teams within the RPs organisations. So yes, by all means, if you let our team know, we can have that conversation with them and let them know what the thinking is in Wiltshire Council, but we're about the new stock.
I'll take Ian Wallace, then I'll take you, Ian McLennan.
Thank you. So this is sort of a question about old stock again, so I apologise for that. But as part of the partnership, you've put in there about how many new homes you've achieved. But do we also look at the net figure? So do we look at homes going out the other end? Because to use as an example from Devises, this last year we've lost 30 homes, social housing properties in the centre of the town. In my division, where where Sovereign Housing have sold them off for development. So whilst it's great to see that we've got 688 new homes coming in, that's only 658 if we take those 30 homes off. So do we sort of monitor the loss of housing as part of the partnership as well?
We don't monitor that. We have very little control over housing lost. The target is set initially by the Strategic Housing Market Assessment that would have taken loss of housing units into account.
Okay, Ian McLennan on.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's still on old stock, but in relation to the partners that you're looking to encourage and join with going forward, what weight do you give to the maintenance of their existing stock? Because again, try not to be parochial, but we have to be parochial because that's, you know, we've all got our own patch and we see what raises the issues. So in my patch, there are houses that struggle to get repairs done and appear very shabby, and yet, you know, the providers can go on building new homes. So I just wondered what influence we have on that and what weight we give to in choosing partners going forward to past history. Thank you.
Have an answer?
Yeah. As part of the selection process, the RPs were invited to complete an application form. And on that, we asked them questions about their customer satisfaction surveys, their responsive repair times, and so forth. So it was scrutinised at that stage, and we will be monitoring it going forward. But if there are any issues that you think we should be raising with them at that point, then please let us know.
Just a quick comeback on that. Is there a list of the partners that you're looking at now? That we could have, so we can say, oh yeah, that's the ones that we think
Yeah.
we've got a problem with.
There is a list of partner members on the council's website. I can send you a link to that, councillor.
Councillor Rich Rogers?
Thank you, Chair. Affordability criteria is normally focused on the sale price of the house, and increasingly ongoing running costs are becoming a factor, particularly for affordability. I wondered if that's a consideration and whether that's taken into account of the design of these properties, making sure that they are thermally efficient and have the right sort of sustainable energy systems in place.
Okay, well, affordable housing is, the delivery comes by two routes. So one is those that we get through planning obligations. That's the majority of the affordable housing that we get. And that is dependent on what the developer provides. And they will provide what they're required to provide. So the RPs take those units from them. In terms of the RP's own developments, we're seeing a trend towards them providing a higher specification. And it is one of the things that we're monitoring. So it was one of the questions we asked when they joined the partnership. They all signed up to basically support our climate agenda. And we are definitely noticing a trend towards better provision.
Councillor Jackson?
Indeed, thank you, Chair. In fact, I had two questions, and that was one of them. I'll just modify that slightly and wonder whether or not that engagement could include targets rather than just questions. My second question, Chair, was whether or not such properties would include scope for EV charging in future. Thank you, Chair.
Who wants to take the answer for that one, for EV charging? They should be in every new home built now, as far as I'm concerned, but there you go.
EV charging, as far as I'm aware, EV charging is coming through building regs. So it will be part of, in certain circumstances, it will have to be provided for every property, regardless of tenure, whether it's market or affordable. And there are exceptions to that, but it's set out in the building regulations.
Do you want to come back on that, Tony?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure that it is part of building regulations, and I'm just wondering whether we shouldn't be taking a lead here and showing a lead by inviting such infrastructure. Thank you.
I think perhaps the way around that would be that any future planning applications of new build should include it, whether it's social housing, private housing, or anything. At the end of the day, it should be something in the way forward. One comment and a question. I too, in the Pewsey areas, have suffered the sale of about 5 or 6 properties, and there's no plans for any new build in my area because there's not any land available. So it's disappointing because it's a loss of buildings. I bear out Councillor Wallace in Devizes, a large amount of properties being sold off in the centre, and people have been living there for many years, being told they've got to leave. And they've been living there for many years. They've built up their home in the palace and being offered very substandard alternative accommodation while they're in a position they're trying to get to find a way of purchasing the building. It's very difficult for them, but I think that's very harsh that they're being turned out onto the street when it's no fault of theirs. And it's just, I don't know if it's purely for profit or something, but I do know of that occasion. And I think it's not only in Devizes that's happening. The other question I was going to ask is private housing, leaseholds, social housing, the word affordable. What is affordable? Because if you're only on 10,000 a year, 20,000 a year, or 30,000 a year, what do you define the word as affordable that somebody can physically afford to move into a property?
Okay, well, affordable housing is defined at national level, and how we choose to, we've got certain choice in how we implement it. So in terms of the 10 years, we're talking about affordable rented, which is let at a maximum of 80% of market rent. And that's one of the main tenures that we deliver in Wiltshire. The other one is shared ownership, which is sold by RPs. So a share will be sold to a householder that the household has less than £80,000 income, and then a low rent is charged on the share that is retained by the registered provider. So those are the two main tenure types that we deliver in Wiltshire. That may change because of the evidence base of the new local plan. So as we look at that evidence base, it could be that we need to change the tenure types that we're delivering. Everything is very evidenced. First homes will be coming in shortly. We've decided as a council that we're going to implement first homes now, as required by the government. So 25% of all affordable homes going forward on new applications will be first homes, and those will be sold directly by the developer to the household. So RPs won't be involved in that process at a minimum of 30% discount. Again, we could choose to implement 40% or 50% discount, but that has to be done through the local plan review.
Okay. Long answer, and very technical, with a lot of percentages workouts on that one. Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you very much. I'd like to add Marlborough to the list of where houses are being sold. Astor at the moment, they're just issuing letters asking people to move. Some of these people have been there many, many years. So again, housing stocks are being depleted, and it's a great concern to people in Marlborough at the moment. Moving on to the presentation, I noticed there that there's a sentence saying we have the right housing business plan that is in ensuring that we have the right housing. And it was saying that sort of engages with planning process and liaises with developers to ensure the housing develops in terms of tenure, size and provision of adaptive units. One of the key things at the moment must be how environmentally friendly it is, how carbon neutral it is, how well insulated it is, so that it may be more expensive to build, but for those people living there, it will be much cheaper as far as actually providing the heating and being able to afford to pay the bills going forward. And for me at the moment, one of the key issues to make a house right is to make sure that we have a house which going forward for the next 30 years is as cheap as possible for the environment and for the people living there. So I'd like that to be included really going forward. Thank you.
Does anyone answer that at the back?
Yeah, I think with that, obviously, with the Section 106 units, we're just reliant on what is required of developers by national government. In terms of our RPs, I say we have noticed a trend towards more environmentally efficient homes, but they are limited in terms of, there is always an impact on viability. If you're asking more of an RP, we'll get fewer homes. So it's getting that balance right.
Okay. Any more? Derek, sorry, Councillor Waters.
Sorry about that. Congratulate you on your question about the sustainability and the environmental aspects of a new build. I'd just like to also ask about the whether weight is given where, for example, in order to carry out the development, it's required to, let's say, demolish existing buildings of reasonable, structure. I've got, sorry to get parochial here, but I have a situation where I have a perfectly viable community centre of only 20 years old, which will need to be demolished if a particular project takes place. I'm just interested in whether any weight is given to the consequences of the development.
I'm afraid that would be a consideration for the planner and the planning process.
Right, thank you.
Okay, well, the recommendations here are to note the content on the report. I also feel that perhaps we should get a further update in 12 months' time, unless there's anybody here want anything to be added to that, those comments. I mean, we've had quite a little debate on this today. Is there anything that's bugging people that they want more answers to? Or Ian, Councillor Wallace, yeah.
Yeah, I just wondered if it would be possible that we could get the net figures of houses delivered, you know, that take this 688 and take off those that we've lost, because we've heard from at least 3 councillors that there's been significant losses in their divisions, and I'm sure we all know of areas in our divisions, because if we're saying our aim is to deliver 650, but actually the partners are selling 660, then that's a problem. So could we get those figures?
Is there any officer there that might be able to get that answer to us within a period of time?
We'll look into it, Chair. I think it's a question of whether the data's available, but we could certainly have a look at that for you.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to reinforce that point because, again, I'm sorry to be parochial, but Selwood have sold 2 houses in West Parade because they were in appalling condition, been poorly maintained, and couldn't be further repaired. But of course, they can sell them on the open market. So we've lost 2 properties there. Now, this is not a criticism of Selwood, but it is a reality that these things do happen. So I think this business of having an understanding of net contribution is helpful. Thank you for that point.
Mr. Elford, Phil.
Thanks, Jerry. I'm not going to get too much into the detail of why Housing Association may choose to sell some of their homes. Of course, a lot of them are, as Tony said, difficult to maintain, and sort of within their business plan as a model to sort of remove some of these less affordable homes and then use the money and recycle it. But it's worth bearing in mind that there's still a significant portion of homes which do get sold each year due to the right to buy scheme. Now, as an authority, we get some of that money back in various ways, but it is worth bearing in mind that net figure will not just be RPs choosing to sell properties and then moving their money outside the county. Some of it will be right to buy and some of that money will be recycled. So it's just the net figure alone might not tell the whole story.
Okay, right. So can we just, Councillor Shepherd, did you want to come back?
I think I would actually. I think it's really not so much telling us the whole story, but I think it's telling us more of the story we have at the moment. And at the moment, we have none of the information as on the negative side. So we have great figures of positive housing going in, but I think it'd be very useful for us to know. And then I think we are able to make our own decisions and make our mind up about the overall plus and minus side of it. But I think we do need to know more information than we have at the moment.
Well, basically, you're saying what good news coming in the front door, bad news going out the back door, and nobody knows about it. That's basically what it is. So, right. So let me take those recommendations. I'm just letting Simon refurbish them a minute because it just went from one word. So to note the contents of the report, receive a further update in 12 months' time. And was there something else? Yes. And the select committee to receive an update on the new figures of housing delivered. Net. With the word net in there. Are we all happy with that? Does that give us a bit more comfort? All in favour of those then, please? Anyone against? No? Right. Well, thank you for that. And keep them on their toes then. Let's go to the update on the forthcoming private sector renewal strategy. This is item 7 on the agenda. It's a verbal update on the forthcoming private sector strategy. This is going to be introduced by Councillor Phil Alford. We're also joined by Emma Legg, and this is her first meeting of Environment Select, Director of Ageing and Living Well, and that's what we're all doing well at the moment, ageing and living well. Welcome, and hope you enjoy your post. We have Nicole Smith as well, Head of Housing. Welcome. Is this your first one as well, Nicole? Where have you been before? I can't. You've been a few times, yeah. Well, that's good. First time as I was the chair, so welcome to that one. We would have had Lucy Townsend, but she's rather busy today. So I'm going to see who wants to lead on this one then, please. And I think that's back to you, Phil.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so the private sector renewal strategy is one that we put in place back in 2019. So obviously quite a lot has happened since then. So I'm going to pass over to Nicole, who's going to give you the details and a very thorough verbal update.
Thanks, Phil. So we had significantly developed the private sector renewal strategy back in 2019/20, but unfortunately due to challenges in 2020 and 21 and sort of local and national priorities, we've had to put aside that strategy and take forward some other significant work. The coming few months, we're going to be focusing on the development and redoing of the allocations policy because of the current priorities and cost of living issues. We felt that that is something that needs to be done in the next few months. So the actual work of the private sector housing strategy will be looking to finalise towards the end of this year. So we are working on it, but it has been slow because of some of the challenges and priorities that have come across over the last 18 months. So there's nothing to update you with today. But like I say, we are making progress, but it has been delayed.
Okay, with the delay, are there any questions from anyone around? I'm looking around for anyone. All content with that update? So resolution, Simon, and there's not one written down. I would imagine it's just for an update later. Right, to note the verbal contract, the update, and to receive further updates. All happy with that? Then yeah, okay. Right, passed. Moving on then swiftly to item 8. This is the housing. Update on the homeless strategy 2019-24. It's on the agenda, extra agenda one on the homeless prevention strategy action plan. This report is in the supplement. Introducing this, we have Councillor Phil Alford, again, Cabinet Member for Housing, Strategic Assets and Asset Transfer. We're joined by Emma Legg and Nicole Smith. So, Cabinet Member, and would you give a brief one on this one then, please?
Thanks, Jerry. Doing a hat trick today. Okay, so we've kind of already heard how obviously those challenges that we faced a few years ago altered government priorities. They influenced our priorities, and that sort of led to a slowdown in certain areas, particularly the private sector housing renewal. However, of course, it did mean that we were able to respond perhaps more effectively in others. So I think there's a really positive story to tell around the homeless strategy. And again, I'm going to pass over to Nicole, who's going to be able to answer questions and give you a bit more detail on that. Thanks.
Thanks, Phil. So you've got the report in front of you, but I just want to take the opportunity to highlight some of our successes since its adoption in 2019. So we originally had 5 priorities and 49 actions, and even with those challenges over the last few months, we've managed to achieve and complete 40 of those. But I also just want to add that as well as completing those 40, we've also achieved and completed many other actions that were not originally included within that prevention strategy that we've had to take forward because of some of the issues and priorities that have been developed over the last few months. So we've certainly seen an increase in demand in homelessness over the last 18 months to 2 years, and that's something that we're managing at the moment. So looking at the first priority, which is around reducing rough sleeping, now that has been a significant both national and local priority. It's generated a huge amount of funding to be able to help us to respond to the needs of our rough sleepers in Wiltshire. We're seeing, just so that you're aware, new to the streets, that's new rough sleepers who we haven't seen before. We're seeing on average around 13 a month. So since we started monitoring this in March 2020, we've managed to accommodate 298 rough sleepers off the streets. And we're currently working with around 70 of them, both on the streets and in either temporary or more permanent accommodation to help them to sustain that. So under this action, we've been quite successful. We've managed to deliver 14 of those actions out of 17. But like I say, we have developed a significant number of other additional priorities that weren't recognised when this strategy was developed. So some of the key outcomes, we've got a really big rough sleeper team now that are out daily in the mornings doing verification and working very closely with our rough sleepers who are both on the streets who are in some form of temporary accommodation. We've got a specialist tenancy support for our entrenched rough sleepers. We've got a 7-bed unit in Trowbridge for rough sleepers who are entrenched and who are coming off the streets with some significant complex issues which need to be dealt with. We've got a new 10-bedroom scheme coming online, hopefully by the end of this month, again in Trowbridge to meet the demands of our rough sleepers. We've managed to purchase 11 properties which now sit within the HRA, specifically for referrals of our rough sleepers to help get them off the streets, and that's to give them long-term security. So that's been addition, that's been delivered over the last 2 years. We're also working very closely with Astor Housing Association on our Housing First model. So they've put forward a couple of homes where we nominate a rough sleeper and they provide intensive wraparound support from a multi-agency perspective to ensure that their needs are met and we can try and get them into long-term accommodation. So from a rough sleeper perspective, we've done extremely well over the last 2 years, but I would definitely say there's a lot more work that needs to be done. But we are hugely, the team have done a fantastic job. So we're very pleased with the work that they've been doing. But like I say, it is ongoing. Priority 2 was to identify and prevent homelessness at the earliest possible stage. Again, this is really important. One of our key priorities is definitely around prevention. We have produced a tenancy-ready training module, which we specifically focus on young people and care leavers to make sure that they have got the tools that they need and understanding about what it means to live independently and what they need to know. So that's working extremely well. All care leavers are expected to do that training, and we're working very closely with Children's Services on that. We've got 3 specialist caseworkers now that are jointly funded, so it's a multi-agency response because of some of the demands that we've experienced over the last 18 months. So a particular focus on criminal justice, so that's working with probations and prisons on discharge. That was a significant issue during COVID, so that's worked quite well, and we've built up some positive relationships with probation and prison. Unfortunately, we did see a significant increase in domestic abuse. Very unfortunate, but that is something that happened nationally as well. But we managed to get 1 specialist advisor that we funded ourselves, and we've also got government grant funding recently, a joint bid with Public Health, and we've got a further specialist domestic abuse worker to help with that increase in demand. We've developed a young person protocol, which is specifically how we work with Children's Services to make sure that we can robustly support and manage our young people into more permanent accommodation. That's worked really, really well. And because of that, we're now developing a specific care leaver protocol for the same reasons and purpose to ensure that they are, we are their corporate parents, so we want to make sure that they can move swiftly into suitable accommodation. COVID also sort of made us work much, much closer with our local hospitals. We've seen a lot of hospital discharges over the last 18 months. We've got a really good policy and protocol now with our local hospitals and with our adult social care teams to work together to move people out of hospitals as quickly as possible. We brought in-house, because prevention was a key, it's definitely something that we want to develop. We brought in-house our floating support service. It was previously being run by Julian House. They had 2 full-time workers. So we brought those 2 staff in-house, and we've now got a team of 6 tenancy support officers as well as a team leader who provide dedicated support to clients who are vulnerable, either in temporary accommodation or who are finding it difficult, who are threatened with homelessness, to help them with maximising their income, ensuring that we can look at their debts, increase their benefits, and basically help to support them to stay in the home that they're in. And this work is significantly increasing due to the cost of living. So our third priority, which was to ensure services are designed to prevent homelessness or support those who are homeless. One of the biggest things that we've done this year is a complete restructure of the housing team. This was to enable us to really focus on providing a single point of contact to clients who approach us, who are threatened with or who are homeless, they will have a single point of contact, and that officer will then work with that person or family until we're able to resolve their homelessness situation. So this restructure took place in July this year, and we're currently embedding that new culture. So that was quite a big piece of work, and it did involve all 100 staff within housing. We are also working extremely hard with the refugee and resettlement team in regards to trying to find suitable accommodation for our Ukraine families, as well as the Afghan families who are currently in the hotels. So we're actively working with that team to work through providing suitable accommodation for that group as well. Priority 4 was to ensure those who are threatened with homelessness or who are homeless can secure a suitable home. You'll be very aware that we, over the last 3 years, have developed as a council the Stone Circle Company. We put forward nominations to those properties that come forward, and they are homeless families who are in temporary accommodation or those who are threatened with. So we're managing to refer quite a few people into our Stone Circle properties, which is a form of private sector housing at affordable rents. We are looking to expand the work of our private rented access officer. It's really important that we maximise the opportunities in the private rented sector at the moment. So we've currently got 1 dedicated worker, and we're looking to recruit another 2. One of them will be specifically working with Ukraine families and their sponsors to try and move them on into more settled accommodation. So that's ongoing work at the moment. During the COVID period, we did manage to enhance our stock in regards to rough sleepers, but utilising our HRA stock. So we took on 4 3-bedroom properties, which are now HMOs, which we still utilise to date for single homeless households. We also maximised our use of the discretionary housing budget, which is held by Housing Benefit to help people to pay rent and deposit. So that helped to generate a saving. So finally, priority 5 was to maintain effective strategic direction and partnership working. And I think this is really key over the last 18 months to 2 years. It was really important to get through some of these challenges and priorities. It was fundamental that we worked in partnership with many other agencies to deliver some of these priorities. So we've got a really good established multi-agency working now with our rough sleepers that involve a multitude of partners, including the police and probation. We've got other partners involved with drug and alcohol, particularly going out on the streets, which is what they didn't do before, and also around domestic abuse. We've built up a really good relationship with the MOD to help support with managed and planned discharge from the army. We've done the same with our housing providers, so we've got a pre-action protocol with all housing providers so that we can get in there at an early stage and try and prevent any evictions from our social housing providers. And we've also introduced, as you know, as a council, our performance improvement groups. So we are looking very closely now at some of our performance indicators and identifying any risks or trends, and also identifying some of the good work and successes that we've been doing. So that's a really brief update. You've obviously got the report in front of you, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Nicole. So we've been very successful in the bidding for the government funding, which is on paragraph 6. And I think you'll all be congratulated for that, for the rough sleepers, that is. And that goes, but what happens when it gets beyond 2025? Do we know if that will continue, or because once we've got them all in?
Yeah, so it's been going, so we've done 4 years. So we've done year 1, 2, 3 and 4. And the last year, because local authorities did a submission to government saying we need a bit more stability to be able to recruit for longer. So they have offered this 3-year programme. So we know we've definitely got the initiatives that we're taking forward now for the next 3 years. I suppose who knows what will happen with national government in 3 years' time, but we would hope that they would still see that this is a significant priority, but we can't guarantee future grant funding past the next 3 years.
Thank you, Nicole. Now I'll open the floor to questions. Ian, you had your hand up first, and I'll take you, Brian, and then Ian Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, I'd like to thank the team for this excellent report. There is a huge amount of information in there, which I really enjoyed reading last night. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a trustee for Devices Open Doors and have been for the last 5 years. So this is a subject that means quite a lot to me, and I've seen the impact of the work that is described in here. There's so much in this report. I could ask questions, go on for the rest of the day, but actually I'd like to just focus on the provision of temporary accommodation for rough sleepers. You've got in here around 7-bed property in Trowbridge and then potentially another 10 beds. One of the issues that we experience in Devizes with our guests, and we have a fairly small number of rough sleepers, maybe 3 or 4, with another 30 or so who are in unsecure accommodations, sofa surfing and the like. But when we were able to get those guests into temporary accommodation, at the time it was all in Salisbury, and that actually was putting them, setting them up to fail because they didn't know anyone there. So we would get them there, they would have accommodation, then they would then fall into the issues with drugs and alcohol because they didn't know anybody, and then they'd come back to Devizes and be on the streets. So I noticed there's talk about other properties in here, but it doesn't say where they are. Are you looking at provision in other towns so that we don't have the situation where we're moving homeless people to different communities which they're just not a part of and not helping them move on?
Yes, of course. So our NSAP and RSAP properties, which are the ones that we purchased through capital funding, it was grant funding through government, we are restricted on the value that we can purchase those properties at. So it's about finding the property in a good location at the right price. Devizes, unfortunately, is quite expensive, but I do believe we've potentially, or we are in negotiations with a 1-bedroom property in Devizes. But we do look across the county. We've got hotspot areas. Chippenham, Devizes, Trowbridge are definitely key, as well as Salisbury. So if we can find accommodation in those areas, then absolutely we will look to try and secure that accommodation, but it is all around the affordability.
Okay, Councillor Matthew.
Thank you. My question is, well, it's 3 really. One is on sofa surfing as opposed to people that are actually kind of sleeping rough, how they are being counted, and if there is some kind of a roster on that. Secondly, in terms of numbers, looking at the Afghan refugee situation, do you have figures for the numbers of people currently in hotels, and how many have been settled in proper accommodation, and if we can see if there's been an improvement on that over time? And it'd be useful also to know, the same thing really with our Ukrainian refugee friends as well.
In regards to the Afghan and Ukraine, I would probably need to go away and get the figures from the refugee and resettlement team. They do record that, so that is information that we can provide you in regards to how many people have been moved on from the hotels and the numbers that we've achieved as a local authority. So we can certainly provide you with those figures, Chair, if that would be, yeah. Yeah, fantastic. In regards to sofa surfing, it was actually the sofa surfers who we did see a surge in rough sleepers during the COVID period, because lots of people no longer wanted to share accommodation. They didn't want to see people moving around. So I think that's why we did see, both locally and nationally, that significant increase in rough sleepers during that time. Sofa surfing isn't classified as rough sleeping, and it's also not classified as homelessness, so it doesn't actually appear in any of those figures. However, those people who are sofa surfing are considered as sharing accommodation, so they can apply. It is an identified housing need, so they can join the housing register, and they do appear, like I say, as an identified housing need, and we can work with those people to try and find like rooms to rent or 1-bedroom properties. So it's quite difficult to pull that data off the system because they do have an address, but it can be that they have a number of addresses. So it's quite difficult to be, I can't say to you today we've got 500 people sofa surfing, because it is basically what we call hidden homelessness.
It's a funny name, sofa surfing, because I tried to attach it to sea, because you get people living in summer houses at the bottom of people's gardens, sheds. I had one in my shed for many years in the 90s, and never even got counted on the audit until I brought it forward. But a lot of people are sort of, it's a strange word, sofa surfing, but it is where people are really struggling for accommodation. Anyone else from the floor? Right, I'll go left to right then. So Councillor Jackson, I'll come to then.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. I have to say I've had two individual experiences of rough sleeping being dealt with by the council, and they've dealt with them very well. And so very happy to share that and to congratulate the team on their efforts. I'm just wondering whether or not there's a pull factor here. If Wiltshire is doing so well, are we bringing people in from other places? It's a half serious point. If we have a reputation for looking after people, do we get more people in? I'd like to follow up as well on the chair's question about how sustainable this is. I mean, you've had some successes because of government funding, but that funding is due to end. How do we manage this going forward? And my final point is whether or not we've made any use of the services Cotswold Centre at Corsham. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So the first question around local connection, just to provide you with all reassurance, one of the first things that we ask and we consider and we check and we verify is that the rough sleepers that we are working with have a local connection to Wiltshire. If they don't have a connection to Wiltshire and it can't be defined, we will reconnect them with the local authority in which they do have a connection. So we do have funding to be able to reconnect them to the appropriate local authority. So we wouldn't just do that blind. We make contact with that local authority, we arrange for appropriate transportation, and then they are sent back to the authority in which they have a connection. So just to reassure you that the numbers that we are working with are clients who have a connection to this area. In regards to funding, I would say we've been very lucky this year that we've managed to get that 3-year security, because we have been working on the basis on a year by year. So for us, that stability over the next 3 years has been extremely helpful and welcomed, both locally and with my counterparts. We have welcomed that opportunity to have that 3-year funding. And that is something that we'll need to keep an eye on, and obviously actions going forward about how that can be maintained. And I suppose that would depend on our figures and numbers in regards to rough sleepers that we'll be working with going forward. But the intention and plan is that we try and work with them to try and get them off the streets into longer term accommodation, so we don't have the significant issue in 3 years' time. But, you know, I suppose it's just monitoring that and seeing how it goes. And sorry, what was the question about the Cotswold Centre?
Whether or not the council has had any opportunity to take advantage of space in the Cotswold Services Centre.
We haven't taken advantage of the space, but we do work very closely with them. So we've been down there and we've done a couple of presentations, and they've welcomed that contact. But in regards to the space, no, we haven't. We're not utilising the space. Do you mean in regards to accommodation that they have? Yeah, we have posed the question. And we are, there are significant efforts to try and utilise any empty MOD accommodation. So that is a question we do ask regularly. We are in discussions at the moment with some potential MOD properties, but we're at the early stages of those discussions.
Tony, you can come back.
Yeah, I'll just come back on that one very quickly. I think there are two separate issues here. You are very right to be pursuing empty MOD properties, but the Services Cotswold Centre is actually a hostel. So it's purpose-built as hostel accommodation. So they're two different things, really. Thank you, Chair.
Do that forward.
Councillor Clewer has joined us at the back, just got the back of that. Do you want to respond to that, Mr. Clewer? Leader, come on.
That's better. I think I've logged in. Yes, sorry. Cotswold Centre, we have had some interesting discussions with the Army there. We've visited and looked round, and I think we've got to be cognizant that they've got some very specific requirements for it. But one of the points that was taken away was a further discussion around how the council can work more closely with the MOD on a number of aspects with the Cotswold Centre. We did feel there were some synergies there that could be explored. Back to MOD housing as a whole, you've probably heard me bang on about this before. We really are trying every chance we get to get the point across. The latest minister, Nick will remind me his name, has asked us to get in touch, Chalk, after a piece on Points West or whatever it was last weekend. So we really are banging away at that as much as we can. There is some signs the MOD in their new strategy on housing have started to adjust the wording. Now that sounds really minor, but for the MOD it's probably quite significant to accept that actually they have got to look at a proper strategy and a proper use of empty accommodation. It is absolutely disgraceful. Devizes in particular, the storm damage to properties in the middle of the town, and the MOD had done nothing months on. The tiles were still lying exactly where they'd fallen back in February, and this was in July. So it really is a problem, and it's one we really are pushing. I gather they're talking about some MOD property in Oxfordshire that we might be able to use, but that really isn't very sensible because we want property in Wiltshire, 1,350 empty units.
Thank you for your intervention there, Councillor Clare. Interesting enough, we're talking about MOD property, empty properties. Another Devizes matter, which I hadn't brought up in Devizes now because I can't escape them. But a person that had split up with her husband, who is in the army, she's not. She's got eviction papers from MOD property to go in. So, and she bid for a place last week and come 65th. So it can work the other way. It depends what your connection is with the MOD. So there's another one for Mr. Wallace to deal with. I'm not dealing with them all. Councillor Shepherd, you had your hand up.
Thank you very much. A couple of things, really. When you were discussing about the actual number of houses available and rooms and beds available, would it be possible to actually construct a map, a plan for us to actually have, so we can see whereabouts in the towns and the numbers of different houses you've got, so we can actually see where they're situated? Because it's very difficult when you look at reports. You have a number of houses there, another house, but it just says number of rooms. Would you be able to actually produce a map so we can see where these various buildings are situated? And the second thing is, are the people who are homeless, are they long-term? Do they come into this plan and then you help them financially and with able to get a job so you can get them back on their feet so they can get back into society? So are they sort of here for a month, 2 months, 6 months, or are these able to go through the system and then go back into sort of normal working situation?
Nicole?
In regard to your first question around, was that for social housing or are you specifically talking about for rough sleeping? Okay, yeah, that's not something that we've previously mapped before. So I think I just need to take that away because there are some sensitive issues. We are talking about small numbers, so they can be very easily identified.
I think really, if you could just put a ring on a town and put houses there, so not really, just to give us, no,
that's fine.
Not. So town, you've got so many in one town, so many.
We can say we've got 17 in Trowbridge.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fine, I can produce that. Yeah, we can do that. What was the...
Councillor McLennan, did you have your hand up? Yep.
Hang on, it was about the long termism of the homeless. So
Sorry, James.
Rough sleepers, so when they come in, are they there for a year, many months, or can you move them through the system?
Yeah, they have to go through the system. We tend to find that a lot of our rough sleepers, when we first meet with them, it takes a while to engage with them on the streets to build up the trust. We then often put them into what we call our short-term supported accommodation to help them deal with very often their addiction or their mental health. And then they will go into something more long-term, like our Housing First project or the NSAP and RSAP properties, where they can stay there more long-term and become more stable, or potentially going into social housing. But they wouldn't do that straight away because we very often have to deal with their initial addictions or issues from being on the street. So it's a sort of stepping stone.
Emma?
Yeah, if I could just add to that, because I think the success of how we work with our rough sleepers and the outcomes for those is very much dependent on the multi-agency approach that Nicole has referenced earlier. So whereas we can look at kind of success and numbers solely from a housing perspective, but there may be other factors that, add a degree of complexity that actually need to be dealt with other agencies through our partnership approach. So when we look at the data and the numbers, we absolutely have to see it from that broader perspective rather than seeing it as as solely a kind of housing issue. So just really wanted to highlight the need for us to be working collaboratively, both internally from a council perspective, but also more broadly, and particularly thinking in terms of our health partners via the new integrated care board, which is going to be a key factor going forwards in thinking about housing. So really just wanted to bring that to the discussion as well.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Ian, you're in.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. In reading the documentation, you're sorting on average about 10 people a month, which is, and just going on the comments just gone by, the sort of comprehensive approach to those people is absolutely magnificent. So full credit for everything that's going on. Thank you. What concerned me though was there was just a little drop in that said, written somewhere that says 14 are coming in added each month, and yet the overall number on the street seemed to be less. But that just been made aware. I've read the figures, but certainly 14 were coming in, which is to me of great concern. Well, everybody. I think the question that comes from that, I think, is, well, how are these 14 arriving? What's making them homeless? And then, is there a root cause that's adding to these numbers that we are addressing? So you've picked up the ones that are already there and working extremely well on that. But are we stemming the flow, or working to stem the flow, and with the data that we've learned along the way, going back into whoever it needs to be, the government or whatever, or stopping social housing evicting people, private landlords evicting people? Are we quantifying that and getting back and trying to stop this 14 and making those in turn a lot less? Thank you. I hope that sort of makes sense.
I'll try and answer it as best I can as I understood it. So the average coming onto the streets, which we call new rough sleepers, is an average of around 14 a month. We've currently got between 11 and 14 what we call entrenched rough sleepers who are sleeping on the streets, okay? So we're effectively dealing with around 14 or 15 every month and getting them into some form of accommodation. The ones we currently have on the streets are ones who we have either offered accommodation and they've refused, or they've been in numerous forms of accommodation, which unfortunately they have failed due to a number of reasons. But we continue to work with them. It's an ongoing process. Like I say, sometimes it can take 6 to 12 months to build up trust, to build up confidence, to deal with their addiction. So we are definitely seeing sort of more people coming into the streets. As I've previously said before, prevention is key. It's really about trying to look at the reasons why people are losing accommodation. And it can be for a number of reasons. So it can be relationship breakdown, it can be due to alcoholism, it can be due to antisocial behaviour. There are numerous reasons that are given to why people have lost their rooms to rent or one-bedroom flats. And, we are working to get in at an early stage. So we're trying to get landlords to advise us of when things are starting to break down. We've got that pre-action protocol with our housing providers, but you tend to find that the biggest issues with the private landlords who are renting either rooms or one-bedroom flats. We do regularly report to government. So as a local authority, all local authorities have to do it. So we have weekly meetings with our government advisor because rough sleeper is such a significant national priority. There are numerous stats that go back to government, and we're regularly asked about what we're doing, how can we try and reduce those people coming on the streets. So even with all of the efforts that we're doing, we are still seeing, unfortunately, an increase in rough sleepers. But that's just because of the environment that we're in at the moment.
Yes, go on, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Nicole. That's a very thorough explanation. I think one last thing, the 11 also, are we looking after them for Christmas?
We look after them now.
In the
We
winter.
don't just look after them. I mean, obviously, they are people, unfortunately, that accommodation is not suitable at this time. It's where we have either offered to them. Some people do decline it. They don't actually want the accommodation, but some of them have been, so we're not able to offer them anything at the moment. That isn't to say if there was severe weather or there was a period that we felt that, we can offer bed and breakfast. We do that at the moment as an interim. But it's for some people, it's not sustainable. So we might offer them B&B today, by tomorrow they'll be evicted because they are not ready right now to be in a property. So it's about working as hard as you can, as quickly as you can, to try and get them off the streets and offer them, even if it is bed and breakfast, because it's better than being on the streets.
It was, sorry, Chairman, it was that it's like -10 tonight. There's no one left on the street because we've catered for them all, unless they've run off.
I don't think we want to advertise that as a county. We're very good at looking for accommodation for rough sleepers. We'll have Dick Whittingtons from all over the country with their little bag on the shoulder coming in and want to live in Wiltshire because we look after them well.
I've heard there's a shed going at the bottom of your garden,
In
Chairman.
Pewsey, we did have one that turned up and he was in the bus stop most days. People were taking out food, coffee for 2 or 3 weeks, saying what a great thing they were doing for him. And he was from the Midlands and he disappeared. So let's just not advertise that we're good at what we're doing. Anyone else on the floor got any questions? Okay, so if there's no more questions on that, then thank you for a great report. So we'll note the progress made on the Homeless Prevention Strategy Action Plan and to receive a further update in 12 months' time. If you're all happy with that, then Kieran? Oh, okay, so we're going to note the actions of the Afghan and the map. And you're adding that in now, Simon? Speed type in there. 7 words a minute. Right, let me just get that. So to provide a map of the rough sleepers accommodation, provide figures for for the Afghans, for the regular. I've confused him now because I'm watching him see. Right, so to provide a map of rough sleeping accommodation, to provide figures of refugees being accommodated. That will just about cover us broad enough. All happy with that? Hands in favour of showing that? Thank you very much. Thanks for that great report, Nicole, on that, and Emma, and all of that was good. So now we're going to go to number 9, which is the Climate Emergency Task Group update. We don't, at each select committee, we receive an update from this Climate Emergency Task Group. This is on pages 25 to 28 of the agenda pack. And today we haven't got Councillor Graham Wright of the task group. He's unable to join us today. So Councillor Tony Jackson from the task group will briefly introduce the update. So Tony, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you've got the report in front of you, but I'm not going to read the whole thing out. But I just draw your attention to paragraphs 9 and 10. So we had a briefing by the head of estate and development, and we're talking here about the use of council land for environmental mitigation. And quite a few options are being explored by the council. And the task group raised a significant number of points which the council has agreed to explore further. So that includes renewable energy, tree planting, including the replacement of ash dieback and other diseased trees, woodland creation, and then carbon-friendly changes on council farms and development-led net gain. And the next significant piece of work was last month when we agreed our own forward work plan. So the forward work plan is an appendix, and I'm not, again, going to read through the whole thing, but I'll just draw attention to 3 items, if I may. Firstly, ongoing is the Climate Change Adaptation Plan, the Council's Climate Change Adaptation Plan, and our work in helping to inform that. The second one is to understand the scale of the issue of retrofit funding for insulation purposes. And I think this touches such a wide range of council services that it's going to be an important part of our work going forward. And the last one I want to draw attention to is the local plan. And it's to understand the key elements of the plan addressing the climate emergency agenda and how that fits in with the neighbourhood plan. That's, of course, will also touch on planning. And so much of this has fingers everywhere. Anyway, I know that there are 2 other members of the working group here, and I'm quite sure that Brian and Derek are happy to take questions, as am I, if necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, there you go. So we've got COP26 going on or something in Egypt. Is there any questions from the UK department here of Trowbridge that wish to ask a question? And that is Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It's quite interesting, as I've been trying to get some information through this committee for the last year, really, about how this will affect tenant farmers in Wiltshire. Because I know that Wiltshire has a number of tenant farms, and I see here that, Council Land for environmental mitigation opportunities, and one of the things I've been quite concerned about is if Wiltshire Council decides to go down the solar route and starts putting solar farms on some of the council farmland, to make sure that those people who are tenants get plenty of forewarning this would be coming down the track towards them. And also when it comes down to nitrogen and phosphate mitigation, will there be compensation to the people who are farming the land, because this will affect how profitable their farming enterprise will be. So I was just wondering whether, when developing these new approaches and whether the farmer will be actually taken into account and these things will be discussed with the tenants. Thank you.
Does any of you 3 want to answer that? Can any of you get an answer to that, or is it just a comment? Derek? You're not on the task group. Okay. So, no answer. Well, that's a question you're going to have to ask, or Councillor Wallace.
Yes, I'm sort of reluctant to answer because my knowledge on this comes from my day job, which I can't actually speak to in this setting. But we did raise it in the meeting, and we were very keen to ensure that Wiltshire Council was looking at what the government are doing on this, and anything that we were going to do should tie in with what's coming through environmental land management schemes and that sort of intervention from central government. So I don't think I can give you a very specific answer, but we did, as a task group, definitely impress on the officers that it needs to be a joined up approach so that farmers and landowners are fully aware of the opportunities, but also the implications of what they're doing.
Okay, so Jackson, were you going to respond to that? I mean,
I think I might, James. I think we have discussed this, and we did discuss it, but I think it's worth me taking away to underline, and perhaps you and I can have a chat afterwards, because I'd like to focus that a bit better. Thank you.
Can I just perhaps say, I think it needs to be a partnership, and that's the thing I'm really keen to push forward at the moment. That I want it be, agreed and discussed on both sides, really, rather than being something which is imposed from top down, really. Thank you.
you made a note of that then, Councillor Jackson, and we'll also make a note. Right, okay. Anybody other questions for Clement? If not, then we'll move on to item. Thank you for that, Tony. We'll move on to item 10, which is the forward work plan. With the Vice Chairman, I've been in discussions with the relevant Cabinet members and officers about the Select Committee's forward work programme for the coming 12 months. So there's some more meetings in the diary, but the outcomes of the meetings which have occurred already have reflected in the forward work plan. So we have had meetings to discuss the following: spatial planning, climate change, heritage, arts and tourism, housing development, and waste. So can I invite any comments on that plan? That's the ones we've got in track, so ready to move forward. Is there anyone here that thinks there's anything else we should add to that? If not, then I'd like to note that we note that plan. And can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Shepherd, okay, so if you're all in favour of that, then that's what we'll progress with. All in favour, yeah? Okay, thank you. So the resolution is to approve the forward plan, subject to any additional items by the committee at today's meeting. Okay, yeah, right. Right, well, we've done really well today, 11:44. Date of the next meeting is going to be on the 4th of January. Now, 2 days into the new year of bank holidays, getting the agenda out is going to be difficult. Getting our learning officers out is going to be, they're going to have a Christmas break the same as us. So depending on what the agenda is going to look like, we're all going to be just getting over the new year and Christmas. So I want to thank you all for your attendance. And there's no urgent items, I don't think, is there? So thank you for attendance on this meeting. It's been closed in record time. So all have a safe journey home and don't get wet, 'cause it sounds wet out there. Thank you. Meeting closed.